Okay, well, we're going to get started. I want to welcome everyone here for our weekly Sunday school class, and good to see so many people here. I was sort of half expecting that, with it being the long weekend, that we'd be down in numbers, and actually it seems we're up in numbers, so that is good. So we are, just in terms of where we're at, we are going to be we're still in Genesis. We'll be in chapters 42 and 43 today, so we are actually getting close to the end. And I'll talk about that in just a moment in terms of what is coming next. I do need to mention that next week, Sunday, I will be away. And so Logan Friesen will be teaching the class. It won't be in Genesis. It'll be on a different topic. But once in a while, I am away, and sometimes there's different topics that it just works out to have one of our pastors or other speakers talk about. And so that will be next Sunday that I will be away, but I will be here for the Sundays after that. So, but yeah, every once in a while there is a Sunday where I'm away. So just so that you're aware of that, you should still come to Sunday school because Logan is a good teacher. I enjoy his sermons, and I'm sure it'll be a good class. So it is worth your while to still come. So as I said, we are in Genesis 42 and 43, and I was just doing the math. Because we're going at the rate of roughly 2 chapters a week approximately, that means that after today we'll have about 4 weeks left in Genesis is what I'm looking at. And so I'm expecting that we will probably get to the end of Genesis by around the end of March. So that's what we're looking at. So that does leave the obvious question of what is going to be the book of the Bible or the topic that we look at next. And the answer is I haven't decided. I am open to suggestions. Typically, I try to alternate between Old Testament and New Testament books with the occasional thematic series, but I don't have to always alternate. The reality is there's more books in the Old Testament than in the New Testament, and so sometimes it will make sense to just do another Old Testament one right after. I'm also sort of having to factor in, do I want to try to pick a topic where I can wrap up by early June, so that because last time when I did Genesis, we kind of had to split it up between the summer. It doesn't really matter, I think, a huge amount either way. So what are some things that I'm pondering as far as possible future topics? Well, I haven't done a thematic one in a while. I could do one if there was interest. I could pick one of the courses that I've covered at Steinbeck Bible College and do a shortened version of it here. So, for example, I've done 3 views on predestination and free will. I could do if we're interested in that topic, I could tackle that. I'm actually teaching a course this fall called 3 Views on Hell at Steinbeck Bible College. I've done one on that topic before, and I'm updating it. So I could do a modified version of that. I could do there is a variety of topics that I could potentially do. Also, as far as books of the Bible, in the New Testament, I'm wanting to do the book of Acts in the not too distant future. Whether that's the next one I do, I'm not sure. I could do one of the shorter epistles. And in the Old Testament, I'm also considering the possibility of just do Exodus and just continue on, since Genesis does lead very naturally into Exodus, and I could just continue. And that wouldn't be a bad choice either. So I haven't decided is what I'm saying. So if you have feedback on that, either feel free to come talk to me or send me a text or send me an email if you have a strong preference. I'm not doing Revelation right now. I just don't have the time to sort of, so I will do it at some point, but not Revelation right now. So go ahead and ask, but I'm not doing Revelation right now. So just for obvious reasons, that one's just takes a little more preparation. So I'm not hiding from that book. I'm just letting you know. But there you go. So give some thought to what, if you have preferences, and if it doesn't really matter, that's fine too. The whole Bible's good, so there is no bad book of the Bible that I could pick. I could also do a series I could do a thing on Proverbs or something like that. That would also be kind of interesting. So yeah, a lot of options, or just some of the shorter prophetic books in the Old Testament would be good too. So anyway, we are still in Genesis, and we're in Genesis for a little while yet. So last week, of course, we saw that Joseph his circumstances have changed. He's successfully interpreted the dreams of the chief baker and the butler. And the butler, of course, has been restored to his position, and Joseph had said, "Remember me when the Pharaoh brings you back," and at which point the butler proceeded to quickly forget about him. And until a couple years later, when Pharaoh has his dreams and needs some help interpreting it, and then the butler has to say to Pharaoh, "Oh, yes, I was supposed to mention to you, there's a guy in jail right now who's really good at interpreting the dreams." And so, of course, we know from last week that Joseph gets called to Pharaoh. They make him run there very quickly. And after correctly interpreting the dreams, the Pharaoh says, "Joseph, you're the guy that I'm going to put in charge of making sure that we store up the food properly during the 7 years of plenty." And so we left off last week with Joseph becoming second in command over all of Egypt. And so if you have your Bibles, feel free to turn to Genesis chapter 42, and I'm going to read the first few verses. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So as we saw in the previous chapter, the famine that Pharaoh was informed about in his dreams did not affect just the nation of Egypt. It actually affected the whole surrounding area, including the land of Canaan, where Jacob and his sons live. And so the famine is severe, and there is starvation happening. And I like the way that, you could sort of, the family dynamics of Jacob and his sons is just so interesting. And just where he says to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And some commentators note the same thing here, that there's some obvious indecisiveness among the brothers, possibly even some family dissension. Remember, Joseph's brothers have sold him into slavery, and we know that they had mixed feelings about exactly how to deal with Joseph. We know that Reuben and Judah didn't want Joseph to get killed, and the other brothers apparently had no problem with killing him, and they eventually settled upon selling him into Egypt. So we know that there's at least some level of tension among them. And so you could sort of just picture this family meeting where I don't know whether they were just all quiet or were they arguing with each other, but Jacob just saying, "Why do you look at one another? Like, we can't just sit here. We need to actually do something." And so Jacob decides, "I'm going to send you guys down to Egypt to buy grain." He sends 10 of Joseph's brothers, but there's 11 brothers that Joseph has. He does not send Benjamin. Now, of course, why does he not send Benjamin? Well, if you remember correctly, that Jacob, when he got married, he originally had wanted Rachel, and he got Leah, and then he had to work another 7 years to get Rachel as well. Rachel was his favorite wife. Rachel had 2 sons that were hers, Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph, as far as Jacob knows, is gone, but Benjamin is still there. And so Jacob does not want to lose his second favorite son. So clearly, Jacob still has favorites within the family, and that probably also factors into the dynamics of that family conversation. So 10 brothers are sent to Egypt. Story continues. Let's go to verse 6. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan, to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he dreamed of them. And he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said to him, "No, my lord. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." So The author here reminds us that Joseph is governor of the land. He's the one, he's your go-to guy. If you want to buy food, he's the one that you have to go to. And so his brothers appear before him. They bow down before him. Joseph recognizes them right away. Now, that's not surprising that Joseph would recognize them. I mean, they were his brothers after all, and they were all well into adulthood at the time they sold him into slavery, so he would have easily recognized them. But they didn't recognize Joseph. So why would they not recognize Joseph? Well, there's some obvious reasons. First of all, Joseph would be considerably older at this point. Joseph was still relatively young at the time he sold into slavery, so he would have aged. He's speaking the Egyptian language, which he would have learned in Egypt, and he's dressed as an Egyptian. Remember, when the Pharaoh brought him in, he made Joseph, he changed his clothes, shaved his hair. Joseph looks considerably different than he would have when he was sold into slavery. Plus, the brothers didn't expect to see Joseph. Remember, they think Joseph is dead, most likely. I mean, the life of a slave was not a pleasant one. In all likelihood, Joseph had probably died, and if he hadn't died, he's probably working as a slave in some low-level area. They're not expecting him in this place. You know, when you're sort of out and about, and especially if you're traveling somewhere, as I've had this happen to me, where I'm somewhere, in another province or whatever, and you run into someone you know, and you just totally, you're not expecting to run into anyone you know, and it just kind of catches you off guard, and you just miss it. It happens to me. I mean, if I'm elsewhere, and I run into someone from Steinbeck, and my brain's not in that mode, I totally don't recognize people at first. It happens. So imagine how much more this would be for Joseph's brothers. Plus, Joseph speaks roughly to them. That's probably also part of the disguise. For any number of reasons why they're not going to recognize Joseph. It does tell us that Joseph remembered the dreams. What were these dreams? Well, we read about those a few chapters ago, where he dreamed that he and his brothers were standing in a field, and they all had their sheaves of grain, and the brothers' sheaves all bowed down to his. And of course, his brothers are bowing down to him. So this is like, oh, this reminds me of something. Or when, in Joseph had a second dream, again, where everyone was bowing down to him. And so Joseph decides to accuse them of being spies. Why would he go this route? Why would he not just simply say, okay, guys, you can just so you know, I'm Joseph, we need to talk. He doesn't do that. It appears that he is testing them. Well, we know he's testing them because we see that explicitly later in the text. He doesn't actually think they're spies, but he thinks that this is going to be the way in which he finds out, have they changed or have they not? And so, he decides to keep them in suspense. And you'll notice their response. So when he accused them of being spies, they say, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We're the sons of one man." You know how it is? You accuse someone innocent of something, and they're just so quick to proclaim their innocence, and then they give you all these other details. Well, that's exactly what the brothers are doing here. Like, no, we're honest men. Like, we're just, ordinary guys, and we're just here to buy food, and we're all brothers. We got the same dad. So let's go to verse 12 and see how this continues. He said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see." And they said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, It is as I said to you. You are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. So Joseph continues with his test of them. And he says, it's the nakedness of the land you've come to see. Basically saying, you've come to see what we got here in Egypt. You're here to check out our resources. And they respond, as innocent men typically do, with hyper honesty. Like, you gotta be impressed with just the level of transparency these guys have here. They're spilling all the details. They say, there's 12 of us, the sons of one man. The youngest is, and the reason the youngest isn't with us, he's with his dad, and the other one is no more. And of course, the one that's no more, that's Joseph. But yeah, they're just spilling the beans. You can tell these guys they're telling the truth. They are just flabbergasted at what is going on. And Joseph is continuing his ruse here, where he says, nope, you're spies. I'm going to test you, and we're going to find out if you really have a younger brother. And you notice the initial terms he says. Verse 16, he says, send one of you, let him bring your brother, while you remain confined. So the initial plan, the initial proposal is, you're all going to stay in, one of you gets to go back, the rest of you are going to stay in prison until you bring your youngest brother here. And then he puts them in custody for 3 days. That would have been an interesting 3 days. And you'll notice he put them all together in custody. So that gives them 3 days in jail, having been falsely accused of being spies. And yeah, I'm willing to bet they had some discussions during those 3 days. Probably not the most pleasant 3 days that those 10 men have ever had. It also appears that they did not agree initially to Joseph's terms, because you'll notice that they actually don't go with this route. They don't just have 9 of them go in 9 of them in prison and one of them goes back. So it appears they balk at this, and that's why they're all in custody for 3 days. Going on to verse 18. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them and wept. And he returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound them before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, and to replace every man's money in his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. So Joseph, at the end of the 3 days, has the brothers before him again, and he says, here's the deal. This is what you got to do if you want to live. If you're honest men, one of you is going to remain confined. So he's switching the terms here. It's not 9 of them remaining confined, it's just one. The others are to go back, and you have to bring your youngest brother to me to verify that you're telling the truth. And now, of course, we know what Joseph's motives are. He wants to see Benjamin. That's his motive. He wants to see his youngest brother. No doubt the brothers, they look at this and they're going, oh, why did we give all these details? Why did we say we had a younger brother? And then you'll notice when they're discussing with one another, they just blurt out. Again, hyper honesty here. They're like, here's why this is happening to us. In truth, the reason this is happening is because, we're guilty. We sold our brother into slavery. We saw how he was suffering. He begged us not to do this, and we didn't listen. That's why we're in this situation. And they're exactly right. Because they actually wouldn't be in that exact situation if they hadn't sold Joseph into slavery. So absolutely, these guys they got it exactly right as far as why they're in the situation that they're in. And then Reuben speaks up. Now, I've been kind of harsh on Reuben, and I'm going to continue to be, because I actually do think he's kind of useless here, where he's then pipes up and he's telling them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? You didn't listen. So yeah, that is true. Reuben did say, let's not kill him, let's put him into the pit instead. But just want us to ponder here, how useful is this particular intervention at this moment? You know how it is when you're in a tough situation, you got that one person going, I told you so. You'll notice it doesn't really make any impact here. It doesn't really accomplish anything other than him to sort of just put himself and try to make himself look good. And of course, they don't realize Joseph can understand them. It's sort of like, you know how when parents know, when parents speak in Low German, they assume their kids don't understand and then half the time the kids do understand. Well, in this case here, Joseph completely understands. He knows exactly what they're saying. So there's this interpreter between them. So they're talking through an interpreter, and so they're just bearing their souls here. Like they're just in Hebrew. They're just letting it all out. They're saying, "Oh, this is because of what we did to Joseph," and Joseph turns away and weeps. Like this is emotional for him. This is difficult for him. And after he composes himself, he follows through with what he had said. He takes Simeon and puts him in prison. Why Simeon? Well, there's a couple likely reasons here. First of all, normally in this type of circumstance, you'd usually pick the oldest, the leader, but it is actually true that Reuben did try to help Joseph in his kind of passive way. And so Reuben was not the ringleader. Reuben, in this case, isn't really leading. So he doesn't put Reuben in, but he does put the next oldest, Simeon. And if you remember Simeon, remember the story of Dinah and what happened to her and how the brothers responded and the ringleaders, Simeon and Levi, these men of blood, remember how they tricked they tricked an entire household to get circumcised, and then on the third day, when they were all incapacitated, came in and slaughtered them. And then Jacob has to talk to them and say, "Look, you've made me stink to this area." Well, Simeon is this man of blood, and this gets confirmed later on when we go to chapter 49 later. You'll actually see that Jacob is actually quite explicit in talking about Simeon. So Simeon was a ringleader, he's the next oldest, and he has got a pretty bad track record. And I suspect that the brothers weren't, in terms of who deserved it the most, Simeon's the guy who deserved it the most. So I know I've been hard on some of these brothers here. I've been hard on Reuben and such. Simeon really deserves it here. So he gets to spend the next year in prison. Joseph continues the test by ordering the men to fill their bags with grain, which that's part of the deal, to give them the grain, but then to replace each man's money in his sack. And that, of course, that's going to throw them off. Let's go to verse 26. Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of the sack. He said to his brothers, "My money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack." At this, their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" Yeah, I totally believe that the brothers would have been super stressed by this. Remember, they've been accused of being spies. Simeon is in prison. They have to go back and tell their dad something that their dad doesn't want to hear. And now they open up their sacks and all their money is in there. Like, oh my goodness. So now you're going to have to go back to see Joseph when you run out of grain, and then you have to explain why you actually still have all your money. And he already, as far as they know, he thinks that they're spies. So definitely throwing them off. But there is a reason for this, which becomes obvious later. Going to verse 29, a couple more parts here, and then we'll open up some comments and questions. When they came to Jacob, their father in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be spies of the land. But we said to him, 'We are honest men. We have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan.' Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, 'By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, and take grain for the famine of your household, and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me. Then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men. And I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land.'" So we can see that the brothers are relaying the details to Jacob. And you know what stands out to me from the details that they're relaying? Impressive honesty here again. Like these guys, they're giving all the details to Jacob here. They're not hiding anything from him. It is quite a contrast to what we've seen in the past, where they pretend to kill Jacob and bring the coat of many colors with animal blood stained on it. In this case here, they're just saying, like, this is what the Lord of the land said. He spoke roughly, accused of being spies. We gave him our family situation, and yeah, they're not hiding anything from Jacob. Now, going on to verse 38. As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, "You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me." Then Reuben said to his father, "Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." But he said, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey, then you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol." So Jacob, the emotion comes out here quite clearly. He says, "You bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more." You can sort of hear the emotion. There's Simeon is no more. I'm not sure if he's I don't think he's quite as worked up about Simeon. But anyway, Simeon does get a reference here. So, we lost Simeon too. That's unfortunate. And now you would take Benjamin. So we've lost Joseph. You take Benjamin. Oh, yeah, and Simeon is there too. And then Reuben decides to pipe up. And Reuben says, "Kill my 2 sons if I don't bring them back to you." Now, I don't know. As far as strategy, when you're sort of trying to reassure your father, like, look, I'm going to do everything I can to bring Benjamin back safely. I don't know, for those of you that are grandparents, like if your son is promising something to you and says, "I'm going to do this," and then the father says, "You can kill your grandkids if I don't bring," it just doesn't seem that adept a way to make the case. And the evidence that Reuben doesn't make any useful impact on Jacob is that it doesn't impact Jacob. Jacob immediately is, "My son shall not go down with you." So again, Reuben's trying. I'll give him some credit there. He's trying, but I don't think he's doing too well. I don't think the "kill my 2 sons" approach was the best way to try to persuade Jacob. But Jacob is, I'm not going to send Benjamin down. His brother, Jacob, is dead. And he is the only one left. And if harm should happen to come, then you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. Now, we've talked about Sheol before. Jacob had actually made reference to it earlier, where he mentioned, that I will go down to Sheol in mourning. Just to refresh our memories, Sheol is the place of the dead. It is the grave. Everyone goes to Sheol, the righteous and the unrighteous. Now, they don't have the same fate after that. There's 2 different resurrections we learn about in the New Testament. But the Old Testament gives hints at the afterlife. It doesn't contain a lot of detail, and especially not in the first book of the Bible. It just gives some indicators here. But in any case, Jacob is saying, like, he's expecting, "I'm going to die in mourning. This is what's going to happen." He is catastrophizing the situation. Some of us, we have a tendency to do that. When one thing goes wrong, another thing goes wrong, everything's going wrong, and then we catastrophize. Now, in Jacob's defense, there is a whole lot of stuff going wrong here. This is actually pretty bad. You're in the midst of a famine. You've lost your favorite son. You've lost a son that's not your favorite, but that's still a second son. And you're worried about losing your third one. And so, yeah, I can see why he's not in the best state of mind. I'll pause there for a moment. Comments or questions? Yeah, Andy's comment is it's amazing. It's how it's part of God's plan, and it is. In fact, it's stated so explicitly later when we get into chapter 50 in a few weeks. It's in terms of God's way of making sure that Jacob and his family and the nation as a whole don't starve to death. Is this convoluted way of working through these really imperfect people. And it is quite remarkable. It's, to us now, we have the benefit of we can read this story and we can sort of see, oh yeah, we know what's going to happen next. It's all going to work. It's going to work out as far as God's plan. In the midst of it here, I don't think Jacob's seeing God's plan at this point. Like you don't see Jacob sort of doing, yeah, no, everything's good. You see him going, my gray hairs, I'm going down to the grave in despair. Like that's what's going to happen. So, but yeah, fortunately, there is a broader picture here that Jacob isn't quite seeing at this point. Other comments or questions? Yes?
I mean, from my perspective, which is the only one I have, yeah, I mean, you either have faith or you don't have faith.
Yeah.
So you go from trying to save everyone to just trying to save yourself or not.
Mm-hmm.
But if you believe in a higher power,
Yep.
then we'll always sort ourselves out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good observation. I mean, you either have faith or you do not. And Jacob does have faith. I mean, we know it from elsewhere where Jacob is a believer in God. And even when you do have faith, even when you are a believer in God, you still go through times of despair. It still happens. And Jacob is definitely going through a time of despair. You'll notice he's not cursing God. He's not saying, I renounce, like he's not, but he's in the depths of, he's in a really bad situation, and it's not being sugarcoated. But he still has faith, absolutely. Other comments or questions? Yes?
First of all, I like the immediate fulfillment of prophecy in this chapter. It's pretty cool. But just also with Joseph, just his character as well as a lot of biblical kind of key point characters in Scripture about like how he has a spirit of forgiveness to him, but not of trust, right?
Yeah.
Which we're not called to do. But he uses his discernment
Mm.
in kind of putting his brothers to the test.
Yep.
Sometimes we have this kind of notion of, well, he should be nice to his brothers. But no, not necessarily, right? God's going to take care of them, however. But I mean, no, he is diligent with that, which is kind
Yeah.
of nice, and we just see this whole fulfillment of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, in terms of how Joseph deals with his brothers here, initially when you're reading it, one sort of might wonder, well, why not just be nice to them at the outset, just explain everything. You get to see your dad a whole lot sooner if he didn't go through this whole thing. But at the same time, he is testing character. He is testing whether they have changed. And we're starting to see already that we're already seeing change, just in terms of the group, in terms of their honesty. And their genuine concern for their father. It's a much higher level of concern that they have for their father than they did when they sold Joseph into slavery. I mean, remember, they pretended to kill pretend to kill Joseph and brought this coat in and deceived him, and they had no problem having Jacob go into a huge emotional grief at that time. But now they're trying to spare him. So you can see that there is change, and you wouldn't see it coming out this way if Joseph hadn't done what he did. Okay, well, I'll carry on. Let's go on to the next chapter, 43. Now the famine was severe in the land, and when they'd eaten the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little food." But Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.' Israel said, 'Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother?' They replied, 'The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?' What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, 'Bring your brother down'? And Judah said to Israel his father, 'Send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you and also our little ones. I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would now have returned twice.'" So at the beginning of the chapter, you see that some time has gone by, the famine is severe, and they've eaten the grain they brought from Egypt. And Jacob is saying to them, "We need some more. Go get some more." Notice who speaks up. It's Judah. Judah is not the oldest. He's actually not even second or third. He's the fourth oldest. He is the fourth son of Leah. And this is the point where you see Judah take a leadership role here in a significant way, and where I would suggest we see a dramatic change in Judah's character. Notice Judah responding initially saying, okay, Dad, remember, this is what the man had warned us. If you send us, if we don't have Benjamin with us, we're not getting any food. This is the reality. We may not like it, but that's the situation you're in. Simple, straightforward logic. And so, he says to Jacob, if you send Benjamin with us, we'll get the food. And if you don't send him, we're not going. So if you want food, this is the only way to do it. And you'll notice Jacob's response, and this is sort of a classic, you're sort of deflecting, where you've been, you know how it is, you're having a conversation with someone, or maybe you whichever side of it you've been on, and you're kind of arguing something, and then they respond with irrefutable logic. And rather than say, you're right, I can't logically respond to your arguments, instead you deflect and throw something back at them. I've done this. I'm not always logical. I've been in an argument, and I know, and I've even in some, even like my wife and I have argued about stuff at times, and there's definitely been times where she's pointed something out, and I can't logically respond, and so I bring up something, and you said, and something else here, and you see this is what Jacob does. He says, why did you tell him that we have another brother? He's deflecting here, and the brothers here are saying, well, because we were being honest. He questioned us carefully. It's much easier, by the way, to remember the truth than to remember the lie you made up. So it's actually exactly what they're supposed to do. They answered honestly. And then you see how Judah speaks up in verse 8, where he says, send the boy with me, and we'll arise and go, we may live and not die. And he says, I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I don't bring him back to you and set him before you, let me bear the blame forever. I am being a pledge. I will stand up. I will bring him back safely, and if I don't bring him back safely, that is on me. Now, I don't know. I do know. I compare this with Reuben's, kill my two sons if I don't bring them back to you, and I go, who's leading here? Judah's leading. It's very obvious. And then, of course, in verse 10, he adds in a little bit of irrefutable logic. If we hadn't delayed, we could have returned twice. If we had done this back when we initially proposed it, we'd have the grain by now. Okay, we could have done this twice already. So we need to stop delaying. I'm going to do it. I will take responsibility. I will lead. I will bring Benjamin back. Notice how Jacob responds in verse 11. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry a present down to the man. A little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio, nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother and arise. Go again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and may he send back your other brother and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. And so you can see here that Jacob reluctantly agrees. Jacob, if it must be so. And you know how once you've kind of reached the point of acceptance, now it's like, okay, now let's come up with the plan. I don't want to do this. Okay, so now here's the plan. And Jacob he's all in. He's like, okay, let's do this. Bring some of the choice fruits, carry a present, take double the money with you. Jacob is in problem-solving mode. So he's moved away from complaining, despair. Why did you tell we have a brother? After Judah's intervention, Jacob's like, okay, we got to do this. Now let's maximize the chances of success here. And you'll notice how he mentions in verse 14, may God Almighty grant you mercy. He's putting faith in God. He's saying, may God grant mercy, because God can change hearts. Jacob knows that. And may he send back your other brother and Benjamin. That other brother would be Simeon. Simeon doesn't even get his name in here. So you could tell how much Simeon is on Jacob's thoughts. Like I'm just not really getting the vibe that they're missing Simeon a whole lot. Like it just seems like, you know what, he can just sort of sit there for. I think Jacob would have just let him sit there forever. Is what it looks like. In any case, and then Jacob accepts here. He says, "If I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved." So this is the ultimate acceptance here. He says, "We're going to do this, and if I lose my children, I lose my children." It's actually very similar to if you remember, when Queen Esther has to make the decision about appearing before the King Ahasuerus or King Xerxes, depending which translation you're using, and she ultimately says, because Mordecai is trying to convince Esther to do this, Esther doesn't want to because it risks her life, and then eventually she decides to, and she says, "If I perish, I perish." It's that when you're doing the right thing and you're willing to take the risk, that's the right attitude. So anyway, Jacob says, "If I'm bereaved of my children, I'm bereaved." He doesn't want that to happen, but I got to do it. We got to do this. Okay, going on to verse 15. "So the men took this present, and they took double the money with them, and Benjamin. They arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, 'Bring the men into the house, and slaughter an animal and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon.' The man did as Joseph told him, and brought the men to Joseph's house. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, 'It is because of the money which was replaced on our sacks the first time that we are brought in, so that he may assault us and fall upon us to make us servants and seize our donkeys.' So they went up to the steward at Joseph's house and spoke with him at the door of the house and said, 'Oh, my lord, we came down the first time to buy food. And when we came to the lodging place, we opened our sacks. And there was each man's money in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it again with us. And we have brought other money down with us to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks.' He replied, 'Peace to you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money.' Then he brought Simeon out to them. And when the man had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they had washed their feet, and we had given their donkeys fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there." And so Joseph sees Benjamin with them, and he says that these men are to dine with me. But the brothers, they're afraid. They're worried that they think they've been brought there because, okay, they found out about the money. We're supposed to have that money back. They think, Joseph, the ruler, he thinks that we've stolen. This is terrible. And you can see they're catastrophizing the situation. We have a tendency to do that when we're in bad spots. They are catastrophizing. This is really, really bad. And so, in their hyper-honest mode, they go up to the steward. This would be like the person who's in charge of Joseph's house. And they say, "Okay, we got to tell you here, just so you know, if you could make sure you convey this, we didn't put that money in our sacks. We don't know how it got there. We brought double the money back." And I almost wonder whether there's some amusement here that the steward had about, after they sort of get all this out, and they say, "Peace to you, do not be afraid, chill, relax. I got your money, we're good. And your God, the God of your father, he put treasure in your sacks for you." And so, yeah, it's sort of interesting how that goes there. Going on to verse 26. "When Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present that they had with them, and bowed down to him to the ground. And he inquired about their welfare, and said, 'Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?' They said, 'Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive.' And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, 'Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son.' Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep. And he entered his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out. And controlling himself, he said, 'Serve the food.' They served him by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at one another in amazement. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. So Joseph sees them again. They bow down. You see this theme where they're getting used to bowing down before Joseph. They don't realize he's Joseph yet. He inquires of their welfare. He says, "Is your father, the old man of whom you speak, is he still alive?" It's a legitimate question. I mean, Jacob is very old by this point. And, of course, the brothers say, "Yes, he's still alive." And then he sees Benjamin, and he says, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke? Be God gracious to you, my son." Joseph is overcome with emotion here. He hasn't seen Benjamin in many years. Benjamin was not involved in this whole situation, and Benjamin would have still been quite young when Joseph was sold into slavery. And so Joseph is deeply emotional. You know, he's human. And even though he's a ruler over Egypt, he still has the same emotions that everyone else does. That's what makes this story so real, is that it's not portraying Joseph as this superhuman where nothing impacts him. This is tough for him. He's not just playing with these brothers. He's doing a serious character test, and he's having trouble keeping form. In verse 31, it says he washed his face, came out, controlling himself. He said, "Serve the food." He's still emotionally struggling. He's still finding this difficult. And then the author gives us a little bit of detail. He references that Joseph is served by himself, and the brothers by themselves, and the Egyptians by themselves. Why this? Well, because, as it says, Egyptians didn't eat with Hebrews. That was considered an abomination. You don't do that. Just a little bit of historical information for us here, explaining that. So Joseph is not sitting directly with them while they're eating, because Egyptians don't eat directly with Hebrews. And of course, that would break his cover. And so they have this rather interesting seating arrangement. And speaking of seating arrangements, Joseph has determined the seating order, and it just so happens that all 11 of them are seated in order from oldest to youngest. Now, Benjamin's not a hard guess. That one's fairly obvious about who the youngest is. But when you've got 11 adult males, all brothers, and not that far apart in age, the mathematical likelihood of just guessing their correct order is pretty low. I'm sure there are math people here who could do the calculations, but that would be tough. And so they're amazed. They're realizing that how did he happen to put us in order from oldest to youngest? And then there's another piece of information here, that they're all given portions of the meal, but Benjamin's portion is 5 times as much as any of theirs. Why would Joseph do that? Well, I mean, at a surface level, Benjamin is the brother that he's been wanting to see, that he has not seen. So that's, just on that level, that makes sense. But I think, and there are a number of commentators who point out the same thing, that could also be part of the test. Do these brothers still have that same jealousy that they did when they sold Joseph into slavery? Remember the jealousy, that they were jealous of Joseph. Now, to be a little bit fair, Joseph did kind of give him some reason to be jealous. He was a little cocky. We do know that from the text. But they let their jealousy consume them. And so I think that it's entirely possible that he's watching closely. Do they resent the fact that Benjamin has 5 times more, or are they just happy for him that he's being treated well? You know how it is where when you have someone, whether it's whether it's at work or somewhere else, there's a difference between being happy for someone, even though you were hoping for it yourself, but you're happy they got it, and being jealous of them and letting that consume you. And I think Joseph is watching for that. Now, in verse 34, it also says that they drank and were merry with him. The Hebrew, in fact, a lot of your Bibles have a footnote there. It says where it says, "and became intoxicated with him." I don't think, and none of the commentaries that I checked, because I was curious on this one, like, was this one big drunk fest here where everyone's just like, no one seems to think that. Like none of the commentaries raise this as a major thing that, oh, they're all drunk. It probably it probably is meaning to say, in the context here, they had their fill. They were enjoying themselves. This is a good, enjoyable meal. And I don't, in terms of whether they had alcohol or not, I don't know if that's the main issue here. But they were merry with him. They became intoxicated with him in a sense of that their evening was complete. I'll open up to some comments and questions in a second. A couple points of application that would stand out to me. And first of all, being passive-aggressive doesn't build character. Taking a leadership role does. And again, I contrast Reuben and Judah here. I look at Reuben's approach, and I look at his story here, even leaving aside what happened with Bilhah, his father's wife, which obviously shouldn't have happened, but even leaving that aside, Reuben's approach of leadership always seems to be this passive-aggressive, where you kind of do the minimum. You try to take charge, but you do it in a way that's not terribly effective, and that doesn't really get him anywhere. And we see it later on that Jacob doesn't really have a whole lot of use for him in the end when he's doing his final blessings. In contrast, you see Judah, where he takes ownership, he takes responsibility. And Judah's character has changed significantly. Let's not forget, Judah's done some really bad things too. Judah slept with his daughter-in-law thinking that she's a prostitute. That's also really bad. So Reuben, that was really bad, sleeping with his father's wife. Judah, this is really bad too. Judah, we see growth in his character, that he has obviously changed. Second thing that stands out from application is that we should all remember that we can be tested when we least expect it. That's actually when you see kind of the best evidence of someone's character, is when you don't realize that you're being tested and being watched. As Christians, we're always being watched. We forget this, but people are always watching us. And one of the number one complaints that non-Christians have about Christians is Christians are hypocrites. That's the number one thing. The number one obstacle that people will raise is that, those Christians are all hypocrites. Why don't churches do this, da, da, da. And we got to remember that test, the brothers here are undergoing a very specific test, but we're being tested all the time, and people are watching us, and we don't always pass that test. But we need to remember that there are times we're going to be tested and we're not expecting it. So I will open up here for, we've got a little bit of time for further comments and questions. Yes? Yep. Yeah, good question. So verse 11, what kind of famine is this? Is they still got choice fruits of the land and, all this? I suspect that what's happening here is that, as with a lot of families, they have their final stash, their final reserve. Even when you're in the midst of financial hardships, you've got that last bit of money that you keep under your bed or in the drawer or whatever, and the last thing you go to. I suspect that's what this is. I don't think it's that the author here is intending to tell us that, oh yeah, they're just loaded. They got lots of stuff. Clearly, they're struggling, but they have enough that they're able to bring something. Yep.
I've always kind of attached the physical wealth that you have to the spiritual wealth that you have.
Yep.
And again, faithfulness, right? So when you look at, and then constantly being tested and testing others, right? So you basically, the best way to tell who someone is to tell them that you're completely opposite.
Yep.
Don't assume that you're completely opposite.
Yep.
And then they show you who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've already shown them who you are.
Yeah.
Right? So it's another series of lenses that should all align in order to give clarity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's, and yeah, in terms of the initial point here about, sort of physical wealth and sort of revealing things and, yeah.
So have as much wine as you want, have as much drugs as you want, have as much food as you want, not have as much water. And just go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, and that obviously, we certainly see, even in terms of with the 7 years of plenty, the 7 years of famine, if the Egyptians had followed that model, which is likely what would have happened if Joseph hadn't been there, they all would have been starving too. So yeah, absolutely. So no, there's the attitude of just consume whatever and don't worry about it. That's not a good strategy. And Joseph is sent there by God to make sure that they don't all starve to death. Yep.
Two things that stand out to me about Judah. Number one, I think he's the smart one. In chapter 37, he does the same thing. He protects Joseph
Yep.
in a way that is not, that doesn't necessarily look like a protection, but
Yep.
he protects Joseph. And so he does the same thing here, right? So
Mhm.
there's a common theme there.
Yep.
But the second thing is the idea of substitution, specifically from Judah.
Yes.
Verse 9, that is curious.
Yep. Definitely some good observations there. You're right, with Judah, even in chapter 37, because both Judah and Reuben are the two who intervene to save Joseph's life, but Judah's approach works better because Reuben's approach is, okay, just put him in the pit, and then I'll come back later secretly and get them, and hopefully they haven't done anything to him. And Judah's actually ensures that he stays alive and gets sent away. And then your second point about Judah offering himself essentially as substitution, you're not the only one to notice that. There are some commentators who notice that. One in particular who really emphasizes this is Henry Morris in the Genesis record, where he really highlights this theme here about Judah basically offering himself as a substitute in place of Benjamin's, and pointing out what a contrast that is, where Reuben is doing the passive-aggressive, kill my two sons if necessary, if I don't bring Benjamin back. And Judah's like, I will be the pledge. I will take ownership. I will be the substitute. And yes, that is a type of Christ in terms of, and when I say type, I mean sort of a representation of, sort of that it's an example of sort of a foreshadowing of the kind of substitution that Jesus does. And Morris in particular, I mentioned this last week, Morris is actually, he's actually much bigger on Judah than on Joseph. He actually downplays Joseph more than you'd expect and upplays Judah. I think he goes a little too far on that. I think Joseph's pretty impressive here too in terms of how he handles things. But nevertheless, I mean, the change in Judah here is striking. And you see it, Jacob himself certainly acknowledges it both here and when we get to chapter 49, you see it very explicitly there in terms of who's going to continue the messianic line. Other comments or questions? Okay, yes?
In regards to your comment, who's going to carry on the messianic line?
Yep.
Like that, are you saying because they are the better?
No, not necessarily, because there's some pretty bad people in the messianic line. If you look at the kings, for example, you've got, like, Ahaz was in the messianic line, and he sucked. Like, he was really bad. Like, he offered his son as a child sacrifice. That's pretty bad. So no. But you do see, there are definitely cases where you do see that, where that does seem to come into play, and where character does seem to impact, who carries on that line. But no, being in the messianic line doesn't mean you're a good person. Because, yes, you can look at the genealogies in both Matthew and Luke, and I can point out a whole bunch of really bad people in there. But it doesn't change the fact that it's still significant that it is Judah that is going to continue that messianic line. It's not going to be the actual firstborn, and it's not even Joseph. It's going to be Judah, and it's Judah's a significant character. A really significant character. I mean, this is where King David ultimately eventually comes out of. This is the tribe of Judah. It's the kingly tribe. This is a big, big deal. I mean, you go to Revelation, that book I'm not studying yet with you, where you have Judah comes. It's the Lion of. It mentions Jesus, like the Lion of Judah, the conqueror from Judah. Like This is a big deal. Like Judah is like he's a major character, and the tribe that comes from him is the big tribe. So I think in this case, the character does factor in, notwithstanding the fact that he's also did some really bad stuff we can't ignore. Yes, Bob, and then I'll go here.
I see something here that we can take to heart in our lives with Judah, and that is that sometimes we wonder why we have to go through some difficult times.
Yep.
Why we have adversity and so on. And then also we find out who we really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're going through something with it.
Yep.
Judah, I don't know that he
Yeah.
So this came about and said, you know what, I'm gonna take this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, Judah is a good example here about often you go through difficult times, and that's when your character gets refined and changed. And we're all really good at making that observation until we're actually in those, because I'm the worst at this. When I'm in a bad situation, I tend to complain. I just do. And you sort of got to remind ourselves that, okay, you look back in hindsight, okay, what I went through, I didn't enjoy it, but it helped shape me, it helped form me. Doesn't change the fact it sucks at the time. So, yeah. Go over here for the last comment.
Yeah, I started this I guess the second version of like realizing who I am now connected to God and to Christ by calling out Christ.
Yep.
And I was like, I won't say it, but like I called Christ out and I was like, what's so special about Christ and why are Christians celebrating Christ and not God?
Yep.
Because if someone says Carver is the son of Jonathan, it doesn't say Carver's 13.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows about Carver? No one knows about Carver.
Yep.
Right? But they do back home about his father.
Yep.
So, and then instead of and then someone told me, well, it wasn't Jesus that gave himself to sacrifice for humanity. It was God that asked Jesus to give himself.
Right. Right.
And I imagine myself asking my son to give himself up
Yep.
for humanity. And it was like, no way would I ever do that.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But I would if I was going to follow God.
Yep.
And everything that aligned for me.
Yep. Yep.
That was the revelation for me.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And yes, Jesus did willingly, he did willingly go with his Father's plan. And yeah. Okay, so just a reminder, I'm not here next week, but you should still come because Logan's a good teacher and you'll have some good stuff. And then, so in 2 weeks, we'll find out what happens with Joseph and his brothers. So you'll have to wait in suspense or just read ahead. And so I'll close with prayer and then we're free to go. Heavenly Father, Lord, I just thank you that we can learn so much from reading your word. Lord, we see how you've changed these brothers, men like Judah and the others too, from men who were frankly doing some really bad things to men who started to change and started to realize that they needed to depend on you. And Lord, I just ask that we would learn from this story and that we would learn as well that when we go through hard times, that often you are shaping our character. Help us to have faith and give us courage as we share that with others. I ask this in Jesus' name.